about Eastern Europe. They're undergoing a severe economic downturn as well as the Ukraine. And I was wondering, how do you see Western Europe and also Russia responding to this?
Oh boy. Well, let's hope that respond isn't the correct word that would be used to describe the outcome over there. Those nations, almost without exception, are not members of the European Union. So they have their own currencies, and their currency.
But there was a huge amount of loaning from Germany to Poland
it's far worse than that. The stupidity of people knows no boundaries. Okay, and I can only call. I mean, I hate to call people stupid because it's that's a rather pejorative thing to say, but it really is stupidity. And what these folks have done, just to give you an example, an awful lot of mortgages in these countries, consumer mortgages for people's homes, were written in Swiss francs, just as an example, okay, or German, or European, or in euros, or in marks. The idiocy, the absolute idiocy of writing a loan in a different currency than where you reside. This is how we wound up with Weimar Germany and World War II. This is how Hitler ended up in power, okay? We had, after World War I, Germany was required to pay reparations, war reparations. But those payments had to be made in other than German marks. And the problem when that happens is if your currency gets devalued, the principal value of your debt goes up. So what's happening to these people is they have, let's say they have a 100,000, I don't remember the name of the Hungarian currency, but let's say 100,000 whatever denomination debt for their mortgage, but it's in Swiss francs, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, their currency depreciates by 20%, which is what's happened for most of these nations over the last 2 months. Well, now all of a sudden that 100,000 debt becomes, in local currency, 20% larger. Okay, but your income hasn't gone up at all because you're being paid in the local currency. So this is the nightmare. Negative
your income could be going down because their unemployment is
well, sure. I mean, then on top of that, you could lose your job. Okay, but the bottom line here is that this is the ultimate option arm, right? The exploding mortgage because it's written in a currency different than your own. So a currency imbalance between these countries can cause you to really take it in the tail. And these folks they're getting destroyed, and there's not a thing that can be done about it. So, the problem here is that Germany cannot. Germany's, everyone wants to argue Germany's the strongest of the European nations right now. I'm not so sure that I buy that. I know that's Merkel's, point of view. All right, I've got issues with that, primarily because the banks over in the Eurozone are running with higher leverage levels, some of them as high as 60-1. Than we have over here. They are more opaque. There is more bezel, in a sense, in what they're doing over there than there is over here in many cases. At least the perception of it. Whether or not it's real, who the devil knows? I mean, it's the same problem with Bank of America. I can't look at their balance sheet and tell you what the company's worth because I have no way to value what's there. I can't see inside the kimono. Well, Deutsche Bank's got the same problem. I can't look at Deutsche Bank's financials and tell you, hey, there's all this stuff is level 3. Oh, gee, it's all wrapped by AIG. Well, as long as the U.S. government continues to prop them up, that's great. What happens when they stop? So, I mean, the thing is that I don't see the strength there in the European continent. And, in fact, Germany came out yesterday and said, over the weekend actually, said, we're not going to prop up these European governments, these Eastern European governments. I see a potential problem there because you could end up with a situation where we essentially have a replay of what happened during the Cold War, where these governments collapse, their currencies collapse, and power abhors a vacuum. Okay, somebody will show up to take the reins of power, and it's not at all terribly unlikely to be Russia. The only thing that might stop Russia from getting designs on that sort of thing is they've got their own problems in terms of currency and funding right now. Russia is essentially an oil-driven economy at this point. They've become dependent on petroleum, and they need an oil price in the $75 to $80 a barrel range in order to be able to, to operate their government and maintain a current account surplus. Obviously, oil is way under that right now. It's trading in the, right around the $40 mark. So as long as oil stays around $40, I'm not too worried about it. Now, we get a wild card thrown in there. Something happens with Iran, for example, and
well, I was just wondering if they might try to engineer something like that because they won't be able to exist at $40 a barrel indefinitely. So.
Well, yeah, I mean, the geopolitical instability problems are very real, and one thing that I will note is that historically speaking, and this is an ugly little fact that nobody likes to talk about too loudly, but does get whispered. Historically speaking, when you have economic depressions like this and things get out of hand from an economic point of view, the historical solution to that is a war. The problem, of course, is if we have a war in this day and age, there's a pretty good chance that somebody starts cooking off Easter eggs. And the idea that would both remain conventional and at the same time produce enough destruction to actually realign industry, which is the reason we got out of the Depression from World War II. It's the broken window thing. Everybody likes to talk about when we blew up all this stuff that had to be replaced, right? Well, that's only part of the story. The rest of it is that we dislocated the industry in America. We turned most of our factories into making planes and tanks. And then when the war was over, that industry had to be rebuilt into building things like cars, all right? Well, that's good because it gets all the old cruft out of the system. The old factories go away, and the new ones are able to be built without all of the overhang from the old infrastructure there. So that's the good side. But, of course, war as a means to get there is not great, and unfortunately, the world has shifted. The idea that we're going to have, tanks and columns riding down, fields and shooting at one another, that's fantasy. Nowadays we send in planes, and and the danger is that if it gets out of hand, we have enough people with nuclear weapons that somebody's going to use one. So I hope we don't go there, but there's a real problem with political instability, and Eastern Europe is a flashpoint for it. There's no doubt. I'm very concerned about the potential instability there. Frankly, I don't think the Eurozone can bail them out. I don't think it's a matter of want to. I don't think they have the money. And when you get down to it, that's what it comes down to. I think you're going to have to see political and economic system collapses over in the Eastern European area because of where they denominated their debt. It has nothing to do with the sustainability of their industry. It has to do with the fact that their debt is denominated in a currency other than their own. And that was a critical mistake. It never should have been allowed, but then again, we shouldn't have been writing liar loans over here in the U.S. either.